I'm going to go ahead and get us started because I know we have a really exciting discussion ahead of us. But welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Leading Forward and Empowering Emerging Leaders Across Different Industries. I'm Eileen Coombs. I'm the Education Lead at Delegate Solutions, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. I have a fantastic panel that you can see on your screen of industry experts who are really eager to share their insights and experiences. And the goal of this session is really to understand the journey of emerging leaders and new managers as they navigate their roles across various sectors. We'll discuss best practices, strategies, ideas, so that we can all continue to improve the journey, not just for our emerging leaders, but maybe for ourselves as well as we learn through this discussion. At Delegate, emerging leaders in particular as a population has kind of become a passion area for us. As a delegation company, we've worked with hundreds of leaders and their teams over the past 17 years to help them find time and energy in their day so they can focus on what we call their most impactful contribution. However, over the last year and a half or so, I've been diving into the emerging leader population. I've seen a huge gap in terms of support and development of these rising stars across all different industries. And it became really clear to me as I was researching this particular population that there really is a need to support them early on that allows them to lead with intentionality so they can really focus on strategic priorities for their organizations. I really believe, and I think our company as a whole really believes, that by investing in the professional development of emerging leaders, you're not just preparing individuals for their current roles, but you're really paving a way for the future success of the organization. And so that's why we're here today. That's where this webinar comes into play as we look at how we can empower leaders, those rising stars, to really move forward in their journey with smart, deliberate leadership habits. So our plan for today, the agenda, if you will, is I'm going to introduce our panelists in just a moment. And after that, we'll move straight into the panelist Q&A section of the webinar. I've encouraged our panelists to prepare for questions that were submitted in advance. And if time allows at the end, we'll try to open the floor for questions from you, the audience, so we can hopefully answer those questions directly. Let me begin with some introductions. I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Derek Szafranski. Did I say it right, Derek? I think I got it. He completed his clinical residency at the National Center for PTSD in Boston, Massachusetts, and served as a fellow for the Harvard University Medical School and Boston University School of Medicine. In 2014, he joined the Ralph H. Johnson VA Medical Center in Charleston, South Carolina, serving in a bunch of different capacities there in over 8 years. And then in May 2022, Derek joined the Orlando VA healthcare system as the Associate COO and Assistant Director, and then fully transitioned to COO and Associate Director a couple months later. In 2023, he became a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. So welcome, Derek. I'm thrilled to have you here today. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Jackie Lesser, a leadership career coach based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Jackie is the founder of Creating Impact LLC, a leadership career coaching company working with those who are committed to being the change they want to make. She brings 2 decades of coaching expertise, offering guidance, accountability, and a vast inventory of transformational tools to support clients along their leadership journey. Jackie draws from decades of industry experience and strong insight into human behavior to create the space necessary for deepening the learning and forwarding the action for positive personal and collective change. And I'm so thrilled to have you with us, Jackie. Thank you for being here today. And then last but not least, I wanted to welcome Alex Marin. Alex is a leader in the hospitality industry, spanning multiple brands across many of the country's largest markets. His current role is general manager at the Asilomar Conference Grounds, a nationally historic registered site owned by the state of California and located in Pacific Grove, California. His past experience includes the creator and proprietor of several award-winning food and beverage concepts, including brick and mortar restaurants and even food trucks. Alex's journey has been chronicled on the Food Network and into cookbooks. So thank you, Alex, for joining us. I know it's early for you this morning, so I appreciate that. And of course, assisting backstage today with our discussion, really ensuring everything runs smoothly, is my colleague Mackenzie from Delegate Solutions. If you have any technical issues or have a question you want to ask, feel free to reach out to Mackenzie via chat and she'll be happy to help. So thanks, Mackenzie, as always. All right, I want to go ahead and just dive into today's discussion and explore those essential skills and strategies that we all have experienced empowering managers on their leadership journey. So for panelists, I want to get to know you a little bit more and understand your respective journeys a little deeper. So I'm wondering if each of you can share a pivotal moment or experience in your leadership journey that significantly impacted your growth as a leader. Curious kind of what you learned, how it's shaped your approach today. Jackie, can I have you start us with that?
Sure. I think one of the things that happens to many, but certainly happened to me, was I was doing exceptionally well in my career, actually performing the tasks and the responsibilities of my day-to-day functions. And as a result, I was promoted into a leadership role without any kind of assistance or support. There was the person that I reported to that was every now and again very helpful, but no formal training, not even any informal training. So that was pivotal for me. Like, here I am, a leader. I could not say no to that job. I mean, it was an incredible promotion. And what that ended up doing for me is putting me as far away as I could be from all the things that I loved doing. So yeah, I don't remember if you asked what I did about that, Eileen, but I mean, that's part of the journey, like actually how I overcame that. But I think that was a pivotal moment for me and a career defining and career changing moment.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. I can relate to that experience. So I appreciate that. Alex, what about you? What pivotal moment comes to mind for you in your journey?
Honestly, very similarly. I started my career with Marriott, actually down in Orlando, Florida. And it was very quickly, provide the opportunity to be a supervisor and then go through management training. The great thing about that company was that they actually had a really formalized process in developing leadership within the organization. And that was very pivotal. I was with Marriott for the first 5 years of my career, but I took a lot of the approach to development of talent from that initial introduction into like an organizational environment. So whether it is in I've applied it in my own entrepreneurial endeavors and developed talent from within, and then of course across other companies that I've worked for along the way, understanding kind of how I was best set up for success as I kind of transitioned into leadership and then management, and then being able to fill in gaps where I saw them at these other organizations. It was really pivotal, and I think that's why this panel's discussion is actually so valuable.
Thank you. Wonderful. Derek, what about you? What was that pivotal moment for you that comes to mind?
Yeah, this was probably my hardest one to think about. Oh, because there's been so many. But I would say honestly, it's a little bit recent, honestly. So our deputy CEO who had our finance department, so just sort of kind of understands our scale. We have about 6,000 staff, 143,000 patients across 11 sites of care, and a $2 billion budget. So we're actually the busiest VA in the country. So we do about 2.9 million patient visits a year. So in February, I had taken over our CFO and fiscal department as part of my direct reports for the first time. And literally 3 weeks later, the VA decides to halt essentially all hiring practices and cuts my budget by about $40 million. So overnight, I was in the red by $40 million. And I was on a growth percentage of 9.5% from an FTE standpoint. And they targeted us and said, get back to zero by the end of the fiscal year. Now, mind you, I had never run a fiscal department in my entire life, let alone a $2 billion budget. So, it's, you rely on certain skill sets. You rely and you find knowledgeable people that you trust. to a really high degree. But there's been countless of these. If you've been in leadership long enough, there's been countless of these where you get thrown into stuff where you don't know the answer. And it's part of being, comfortable with being uncomfortable. But also the confidence that I figured out really hard stuff before, and we're going to figure this out too. I think the difference is as you grow and move up the leadership chain, is you're not the subject matter expert in so many of these things. When you're a frontline leader, you're oftentimes a subject matter expert in that area, because usually you came from that area. But the higher you go up, the less you know, which is scary, to say the least. But finding the right people to really work with, rely on, and making sure you know enough to know if this is the right plan. And very fortunate. I mean, this was, if you see gray hair, this is what caused a whole bunch of gray hair. But we just finished our fiscal year literally on September 30th, and we finished with $1,000 under budget for the year, and hit our growth targets thanks to a whole bunch of hard work from folks. But it pushed me in a hurry. So it was a great opportunity. But not ideal for like the very first month of my fiscal management.
No, that's so challenging to have all those cuts and expectations at one time when you're just freshly coming into a new role. So, and I loved what you said about being comfortable with the uncomfortable, because I do think when you're a leader, that is very much like the foundational element of how you kind of figure things out. And it's a lot of the day to day is being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I liked that thought a lot. You all are drawing from very different industries, backgrounds, and experiences. And I'm wondering if you can think of examples of leadership challenges unique to your industries and how emerging leaders can overcome them. There's something that comes to mind. Alex, you look like you're about to speak, so go for it.
I have to tell you, so I've operated hotels in multiple markets. So whether it's Orlando, Philadelphia, Dallas, California, they all have a different employment base. And a lot of times in this industry, at a line level employee, English can be a second language. There's different cultural backgrounds that you need to consider, and they're all different to each market. So one of the most crucial things I learned is being able to pivot based on what my team is comprised of, and ensuring that I'm meeting them at their communication level and needs, and understanding kind of what their cultural background is, and how that how that's evident in the actual operation. That's been a core skill for me, and super important, especially from an emerging leader perspective. Understanding your people, making sure you're able to pivot accordingly.
Love that flexibility and adaptability, and just that knowledge and understanding, or seeking to understand, is really key. And Jackie, what comes to mind for you when you think back across your experiences? What are those leadership challenges that emerging leaders can overcome from your past experiences?
Yeah, I think that some of the challenges are deer in the headlights. If there's not a good support system or any kind of training and things like that. And also this deep feeling of inadequacy. There's like this new person on the block, and who's going to show me, who's going to tell me. And because I do coach across industries, that is a really common thread across industries. So it's typically that the company or the organization is not clear on their own culture, not clear on their own standards for leaders, and not clear on even how to onboard someone.
Yeah.
As a leader. So that feels like a real big challenge to me. So I think it's really important to have support systems in place.
Absolutely. I love that. I couldn't agree with you more. And in the research that I did with some other organizations leading up to this panel, I heard a lot of that, like the onboarding is in place. There's a lot of sense of imposter syndrome for those new leaders. And I think too, and Derek, I want to hear your perspective as well, but I think too, I'm hearing a lot of, they're still holding on to the old pieces of their responsibilities, and transitioning from peer to leader, individual contributor to leader is a challenge, and adds to that imposter syndrome a little bit.
That's right. And I was just going to say also, getting out of the weeds is, it feels like I haven't worked with an emerging leader who hasn't had trouble getting out of the weeds.
Absolutely.
I also feel like part of that is like nature versus nurture in the role. Like there's certain leadership characteristics and techniques that you're going to learn for yourself, what makes the most sense for yourself. And then there's only so much that the organization is going to disseminate. So finding that kind of happy medium, like filling in your gaps, and finding, you know, good resources within your organization that you can go to, hey, how am I going to address this problem today? What have
Correct.
you done in your past?
Right. And also reading books and talking to people that you already know, like showing your own initiative for that, to your point, Alex. Yeah.
Wow.
Totally.
Derek, what do you want to add to this conversation? I know we kind of went on a tangent.
No, I love it. You know, we talk about imposter syndrome. That, you know, anytime you move into a new job or you get promoted, I don't care what level in, there's always that little bit of fear. I've had it at every single promotion I've ever had. And then there's usually like some moment that hits and I'm like, oh, I can do this. Like, and I can kind of explain one is, you know, what's a little bit unique to healthcare is like, we don't get to shut down. And in fact, you know, during emergencies, and you're seeing it right now up in North Carolina, you know, you still have to take care of patients or people die. And so my very first day as the COO here was the start of our incident command for Hurricane Ian, which was the Category 4 hurricane that hit the Fort Myers area and ended up hitting us as a Category 3 here in Orlando. I had never been an incident commander, let alone for an organization this size. So I was running operations for the entire organization. And you know, you have to grow up real fast when you're doing stuff like that. But you got people there with you, and it's kind of the same thing I was talking about earlier. Is you got smart people to work with that are there. But absolutely, you know, one of those things that's unique to healthcare, you know, whether it's mass shootings or cyber attacks or, you know, us helping out Asheville. I mean, my emergency management team is literally in Asheville right now carrying a generator to get it hooked up because they don't have power. And so how do you help across the United States when everything's flying? Because we don't get to go home, you know, and how do we plan and surge for inpatients coming in? So we took patients from Bay Pines and staff from Bay Pines. So where do we house them? How do we get them in beds? And these are sick people, you know, and you prep for worst case scenarios all the time. I mean, we run mass shooter drills all the time. We're running cyber attack drills all the time. We're running hurricane drills because you live in Florida and it's going to happen. So, you know, it's the stuff that people don't see, but that preparation makes your confidence better. And then the after action. And I'll tell you, this is crucial. And I don't think we've touched on this yet. You're going to screw up. I'm going to screw up. I screw up regularly. Your people are going to screw up. When you're doing your after actions, when you go back and you say, okay, what didn't? Be hard on the problem, not on the people. And so much of this is process, because the last thing you want is the finger pointing, the blame. Why wasn't this printed? How come we didn't know where this was? How is this possible? There's a billion things to do in an emergency situation, and you get better every single time. So if you're ever in a leadership position and you start seeing finger pointed, shut it down. That's a culture killer when it comes to that. So definitely a unique, but something I'm very proud of my system, because we've now had, just in 2.5 years, probably 6 different major incident command situations that we've had to halt everything and take care of for weeks on end. So very happy about that. But yeah, stressful, but you know, high value too.
It is stressful, but it's so appreciative. And being in North Carolina, knowing what's happening across the state right now, thank you to your team. You said something interesting about, you know, tackle the issue, not the people. And I really believe that, you know, most people go into their jobs, go into a challenge, go into a project with the best intentions. And so I totally, that really resonates with me quite a bit, is being understanding that you are going to screw up and recognizing it's about the issue, not necessarily the person, that they're not necessarily trying, you know, they're not purposely screwing up. They're not purposely trying to, I mean,
Yeah.
but it is rare.
Well, and if you ever read anything about high reliability organizations, which is what the VA constantly talks about, HRO policies, but part of that is just culture. And just culture is it'll tell you on the continuum where things are from a processes problem, training problem, and really where to start as a manager. And then it does have a section for ethical violations, and those are different. Those are handled differently. But if you're ever wondering, like, well, how do I address this as a manager? If you read Just Culture Principles, it really does give you a nice starting point.
Nice. I'm writing that down because I haven't heard of that one, so I'm curious. I heard you all share some specific skill sets as you were kind of explaining the challenges. But I'd like to hear, like, dial in on that a little bit more. What are the core skills that are crucial for new managers, emerging leaders to develop early on in their careers? And Derek, I'm gonna have you get us started with that because you started to hit on some for sure. So what are those? What do you think are those crucial skills that they need to have early on?
Yeah, I kind of break it down into 4 different categories. So the first thing is the prioritization and expectations is whatever, I don't care what industry you're in, there's 1,000 things that you can do differently, change. If you try and do it all at once, it's not going to go well. I think early leaders make this mistake all the time. I see senior leaders make this mistake. But one of my favorite trainings I ever got was at ACHE, and it was a COO of a very large hospital system. And he's like, we prioritize 3 things a year in my lane. And he's like, and we do a bunch of other stuff, but those are the 3 things we're going to resource. Those are 3 things that we're going to track. Those are the 3 things that we, come hell or high water, this is what we're doing. And we're going to get there. And that's where the expectations are too, right? Is we're at A, we're going to B, how we get there is negotiable, but we are getting there, end of story. But you can't have too many of those. And so the other aspect of that, and I think especially emerging leaders, because you're going to be still probably a content expert, is the problem solving. So, your ability to problem solve and look at solutions and find solutions to get you there. Because a lot of times your frontline staff probably aren't, they can come up with those, but a lot of times that's your job as the frontline leader, is to figure out solutions to get X to Y. And that's part of it. As you get more senior, your actually job is to find people that are better at doing that and they're experts, and then they handle a lot of that. And you do stay out of the weeds as much as you can, because usually probably colleagues see more problems than good. But that's the second one. The third one is you got to be good with people, and I think you're seeing more emphasis on this as cultures are changing, the age population is changing. There's more emphasis on emotional intelligence. You have to adapt your style. Not everybody learns the same way. Not everybody is going to receive you the same way. There's people that I can say 3 sentences to, they got it, they're on their way. There's other people where I need to explain the why at length in order for them to get buy-in. So it's learning that with the people. And then as you get older, identifying talent. So is this the right fit? I can give you a quick example. It's like I made a mistake very early on. I hired a great psychiatrist because she was a great psychiatrist to go be a frontline leader. She was not a good leader at all. She was a horrendous leader. 2 completely different skill sets. Yeah. But she was the most productive. She was great with her patients, but she was actually pretty bad with her colleagues. And she didn't have a data mind. She didn't really have she was just really good at being a psychiatrist. So that was a bad leader, and that was a bad call on mine. And then finally, the last one, and I think people, this is, I think, one of the hardest things to find, is people that really understand data to a high degree. I can tell you that part of my success, and a large part of my success, is I can look at numbers and tell you where there's a problem. And then I can probably tell you what processes, by going back and looking at the processes, where the problem is. And that's always just been, I'm fortunate to have data background and understanding statistics at a high level. But you'd be amazed how many people, even at high level leaderships, don't understand how to read data and then use it.
Absolutely. I struggle with that too. So I can relate to that. Jackie, what would you add to that list? What do you think are those crucial skills that leaders need early on?
So I love what Derek said. And what I would add, I'm thinking about the leaders at any level, but specifically to learn it at this level, at the emerging level, which would be listening, like really, really listening. Like, this is the most interesting person in the room. Like, these high level listening skills, deep listening, that's what we call it in coaching. And then I would say the other one, let me go back to listening. There's nothing for development of yourself and another, and the relationship, better than deep listening, to be seen, to be heard, right? So that's really important. And then the next thing is reclaiming and restoring your childlike curiosity.
I love that.
Asking questions from the I have no idea place, because number one, that makes somebody else feel like really at ease. They don't have to defend themselves. You're not asking, why did you do that? Because that's not a real question. But like, wow, what was it that had you come to that conclusion? Tell me more. I'm here. So that curiosity is just so powerful. Again, creating relationship, and then also just for this new leader to understand, what are they working with, right? And then the next thing I would say, these are my top three, would be really powerful questions. Powerful questions they do come from deep, from childlike curiosity, but they often are very simple. Really, really simple questions like, wow, how did you get there? Or, what did you imagine that was going to bring? So like, or what else have you thought about? Just what else have you thought about? Like, oh my God, well, I haven't thought about anything else. Like, I'm in my lane. So anyway, those listening, curiosity, and simple, powerful questions are really just so important for developing relationship and understanding your role.
Love that. I love all of those. Thank you. Alex, what are you going to add to that list?
Well, first of all, I'm taking notes while you guys speak, because I think it's good. It's interesting. Derek mentioned prioritization, and the first thing that popped in my mind was direction. And I find a lot of times there's many different tasks, right? A new leader is provided all these responsibilities, new responsibilities. They're different than the tasks they were used to performing, and understanding, prioritizing those tasks, and creating that prioritization is all about direction, and having a very clear, consistent focus on where your job function needs to lead the team. So I found that to be really kind of interesting. The other thing that Jackie was speaking about, the deep listening, I always believe in influence. The power of influence is so important, whether it's managing up or managing down. You have the ability to bring people along that like knowledge journey or like that direction. And you kind of need to walk hand in hand with them. So understanding the culture of the people that you're working amongst and with or for, and then always tailoring your approach to most effectively influence them to help you work towards your direction. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know the best path, but asking those questions, coming from a place of learning, you're 100%. The moment you appeal to anybody's ego or as a subject matter expert, whether it's people that you're leading or people that lead you, you have them hooked, because you're able to. They're open. People want to share their knowledge. They want to share their experiences. They want to share their thoughts, and they could be the wrong thoughts, but then you at least have an open discussion there to start to drive that direction of the conversation. And then my last thing that I tell a lot of people, and I happen to this property out here, I have two different. I actually am employed through Aramark as the concessionaire for the California State Park System. So I have two really large organizations that have their own ways of doing business and their own priorities. So finding common language between those two and then being able to disseminate that for direction is really important. And then creating measurable successes for the team. So it could just be organizationally for the entire 110-acre complex that I manage, or it could be just one part of it, the housekeeping team, our maintenance team. Creating measurable opportunities for success is important. The other part of measurable opportunities for success is measurable opportunities for accountability. Accountability gives you a lot of value no matter what role you're in. And as long as you're crafting your language appropriately, it can be actually something that builds a team rather than breaks them down.
Everything you all said is like hitting the nail on the head for me. As Mackenzie and I were building out our emerging leader delegation workshop, it hits on accountability, listening, getting clarity on direction, prioritization, all those things. So I love like everything you've said. I'm just like, check, check, check. I love it. And I'm curious, as you look back or as you think about your experiences, how can organizations really effectively identify and cultivate these skills in their potential leaders? Like, what is the secret there? How do we do that effectively? Jackie, I'm curious what comes to mind for you as you, especially with all your coaching experience. I'm sure you've seen things that work and don't, in your.
Yeah. I think, and this is, yes, I am a coach, but I also believe so wholeheartedly in a coaching culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, and, so teaching, like, it doesn't matter what role you play, it doesn't matter what position you're in, deep listening, childlike curiosity and powerful questions are like the baseline skills for working with other people. So I would just start right there.
Yeah, I love that. Just start there as the foundation. That's fantastic. Alex, anything you'd add to that?
I would say that a lot of times, and Aramark is actually a very large organization. So the company is great about providing all these resources and management. But the people aspect of leadership is very key. And this is where I was kind of talking about a little bit nature versus nurture. Like, the company will give you all these policies, procedures, management guidelines, check the box, check the box, check the box. But in the end, the essence of how you communicate, the essence of how you get things done is a people thing. And having great contemporaries to model your behavior. Derek mentioned his the gentleman at Penn, I think, right? That he, that's a great example of finding someone to model your own leadership style and behavior around, and maybe identifying why that person is the person that you would want to model yourself around. And I have done that in my own career at different stages within the organizations that I work. I think that's really important because each company has its own culture. So I'm a culture chameleon. So to match each of those cultures, I make sure that I have a contemporary within that organization that I can, reach out to and make sure that I'm kind of moving forward in the direction and the way in which the company likes to do business.
Derek, what comes to mind for you? I'm sure some of this resonates as well.
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's a nice combo of like structured leadership courses, which I know I've taken kind of at each level within my organization, including an executive training program. But to me, always the core training has always been like almost just in time training, right? Call it JIT, right? Is X is happening, and then I either have a colleague that's been through this, whether it's in my organization or in a different organization, and somebody that's more experienced, and so I'm picking their brains. Is it, how did you do this? What was your best practice? What failures did you run into? And I, right before I left Charleston, I met with my CEO, who is brilliant. I mean, he's run a 5-star CMS rated hospital for now 10 years, and it's a machine. And I asked him, give me a couple of reasons for success in this. And he's like, well, one, you ask a lot of questions, continue to ask a lot of questions, because so many people are afraid to look stupid. And I just kind of assume I am the dumbest person in the room. So I ask a lot of questions, and I'm okay with that because I just don't want to continue to be the dumbest person in the room. So I ask a lot of questions. And then the continuity of leadership is aspect of this. And so when you have good leaders and you have a good team, you're there, but they're also learning too. So you just get better because you're learning from each other in a lot of ways. And I think that's so crucial, is to never be satisfied with that. We just got our CMS 5-star rated hospital this year for the first time here in Orlando, and we're super proud about that. But we just went, and all of our regional CEOs and COOs and stakeholders met to see how do we get all of our hospitals to that level, but also share best practices. And even though we're a 5-star, I can't tell you how many, there were 3 different major projects out of that we're going to steal from other hospitals rated lower than us because they're doing better than us. And their practice was brilliant. And so, like, not going in there with like, oh, we don't need to do anything just because we're at this. Like, we still have a lot of work to do to get even better. And so I think that those aspects are something to take home as you go through, and be gentle on yourself. Like, you're gonna make some mistakes. It doesn't matter how old you are, how long you've been doing this, or how you're gonna make some errors. And you can probably fill up this entire hour with errors that I've made in the past week. So yeah.
I'm the same way. I'm not perfect. I will make mistakes in my leadership journey for sure. And one of the things that I have personally struggled with, and maybe you all can relate to this, is when I've had promotional opportunities within an organization, moving from that peer, that individual contributor role into a leadership position where all of a sudden you're supervising your peers. I have nightmares still about the way I handled some things or experiences I had, and I'm curious what you all have seen, or maybe you've experienced as a common obstacle in that transition, because it is hard to go from peer to leader. Alex, you kind of raised your eyebrows, so I'm curious what's coming to mind for you as you think about that.
I have to tell you, this was like a self-realization moment. Going from, I was working the front desk at the Marriott, and then they made me the supervisor a few months later, and I have a tendency to just be very direct. And I learned that about myself, that I need to soften my approach and be a little bit more sensitive. It wasn't necessarily the wrong message, but showing people through your actions, giving them that space to adjust, and then having really open conversation, I think, is really important. I even now, if I have to have a corrective conversation, or pivot people's direction on how they're approaching things, I think it's really important to just speak with a level of respect and like, bring everyone to the same common place. Like, hey guys, here's my GM badge, I'm taking that off, and let's just talk about what this scenario and how we could have done it differently, and why are we in this conversation now, how did we get to this point. So I feel like that was a big learning curve for me, that I wasn't as self-aware about, like, oh, I need to be a little bit softer. I'm still working on that.
Fair enough. Jackie, what comes to mind for you as you think about that transition?
I think about, I was in that transition early on, and I remember trying to overcompensate on both ends, right? To be a leader, manager, and to also still be the friend and the one who was easy, the one who would talk about things. So it is I don't want to minimize the transition, and the transformation that occurs. What I learned through my coaching practice is there's something in coaching, we call it a design partnership alliance, where you get together with each member and the group as a whole and say, we've never been in this relationship before. Right. So even though I've worked with you for 10 years, we've never been together in this way. So let's talk about what's important to me as a leader, now in this position, or let's begin with what's important to you as you report to someone, and that someone happens to be me. What are you going to need? So you really, like, right from the beginning, you get it on the table. What's important to you as you report to a new person? What's important to me as I take on this role? How do we want to be together, because we're going to be working differently? And then equally as important, so we make some agreements, right? But then equally as important is, how do we want to be together when one of us breaks the agreements? Because that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to speak to me in a way that's not going to work. And so I think, kind of like what Alex was saying, something about setting up a conversation ahead of time. And I actually love this for new projects. We've never we've been on this, we've done this, I've seen you, but we've never done this together. How do we want to be together on this really critical, mission critical project? So I like this design partnership alliance as a way to, grease the skids into this new way of being.
I like that language, Jackie.
I do too. I hadn't heard that term, and I was just thinking, like, Mackenzie and I had a similar conversation when we started working together. It probably was not as formal, but hitting those same types of points, and I never had a name for that. So I love that. Derek.
Yeah, I mean, Jackie and Alex brought up some amazing points. Is, like Alex said, controlling your weaknesses and identifying them early on, as a leader, as you're learning what they are too, because that first time that you're in that leadership role, you may not know what your weaknesses are because you haven't done it. And getting that feedback from your staff, asking for that feedback, really craving almost that feedback on what I can do better to serve you. And if you haven't read Servant Leadership, it's the foundation of how I talk to people. Like, all right, when I meet you for the first time and you're going to be my direct report, I'm going to show you the pyramid and I'm going to show you exactly who I am, and then I'm going to give you examples of what this is going to look like communication wise, for me to you. But I can tell you kind of an interesting thing. So when I took over my very first frontline leadership job, I was taking over in a medical unit, psychiatry unit that didn't know anything about psychiatry. I was a psychologist, didn't know their coding. And the person that was running it was stepping down to be just a regular psychiatrist, but he was still going to be under me. So he is going from leader back to provider. So building an alliance with him was really important. And just getting to know the team, and understanding those relationships before I even started anything and luckily my boss was smart enough to be like, you should do this first and don't tackle a project for like the first month. Just get to know your people. And then a second one, and this was a little different. Jackie's point was beautifully said about that very first initial conversation. Is the next job after that frontline one is I was running and going to be in charge of all the section chiefs, so all the frontline leaders. But the person that hired me into Charleston, I went head to head against for that job. And so I worked under him, then I was a colleague, and then I ended up beating him out for that job and became his supervisor. And so I went from, his employee to his supervisor in 2 years. And that was hard for him because he'd been there for 15 years. And he had a very large ego, to say the least. And I knew that about him. But he also had a pretty significant skill set. He was a smart guy. He could problem solve. He understood data. He was not good with people, at all. And so when I met with him early on, I wanted to talk with him because I didn't want that to be an elephant in the room. And I wanted to talk to him about the value that he had in certain areas where I'm like, look, you're better at this than I am. And so when these types of projects come up, I'm going to need you to help me and to give him that sense of purpose. And it wasn't, I honestly don't believe it as manipulation because it was true. I wanted to use his skill set, but I also wanted to make sure he knew like that he was valuable to this organization. And it really did help. I think having that conversation up front. And I wrote down, Jackie, the conversation of what this looks like when we don't follow our rules. Well, how's that going to look? I'm going to use that. I'm stealing that. I love it. So, because that inevitably happens. They're going to fail at something. I'm going to fail at something. We're going to violate those rules at some level. But we need to have an operation. I might take it home with my wife and say, what is this going to look like when we violate our rules? So I appreciate that.
That's not a bad idea to apply that at home as well. Thank you for sharing those examples. What an interesting dynamic to go from reporting to someone to then supervising them. I've been in that situation as well. And it is challenging, and if you're not careful about how you navigate it, that drama can kind of come up, and who has time for that? So, but I think that's, when I think back on those experiences for myself, that's where I really relied on mentorship to help me guide me through that. And we started everyone kind of started alluding to the fact that having some sort of mentor or role model to look up to is really helpful in this early journey. So the last question, because I'm watching time, I want to ask, what kind of role does mentorship play in the development of new emerging leaders? Maybe how did it impact your journey along the way? Jackie, can I put you on the spot with that one first?
Yeah. There's nothing like it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like as a child, you grow up, you depend on your parents, and it's obviously different, but that person that you can look up to for guidance and support and ideas, bouncing ideas off of them, and some tools and some resources that they have that you don't have to go reinvent the wheel. So I think it's really, really important. The first organization I was with did not put that in place. It was, it happened to be that I was taking this person's place, so he was able to be my mentor. But I want to have one caveat and say that not everyone's a mentor. Just because someone's really, really good at their level of expertise and does not mean that they're going to be a good mentor. So I think mentoring in and of itself is a nuanced role. So as important as it is for the emerging leader to be developing and growing into, we also need to train and develop our mentors.
Amen. Absolutely. Yeah. Great point. Alex, you're unmuted, so I'm just gonna call on you next.
I was gonna say, first thing that came to mind is that you can select your mentor. Like, it doesn't have to be a formal thing; it can be an informal thing. But I would give two recommendations. One, whoever your direct report manager is, whoever you directly report to, you need to establish them as a mentor no matter what. They need to at least feel that you have that relationship with them. I think that's very, very important. And even if they're not the strongest mentor or exactly how you want to model your own behavior, I think it's really important to establish that type of relationship with them. And then second, find the people that you want to model your own behavior around. Find the leaders or the the specialists that you want to be when you grow up, right? And make sure you establish those relationships as well. But be strategic. Your direct report manager should always feel like they're mentoring you.
Like the strategy.
Yeah.
Derek.
That's called politically savvy. It is a very, very real thing. Yeah, make sure you have a good relationship with your supervisor, even if they may stress you out at times. So that's crucial. I honestly think I'm in my job because of mentorship, and I am who I am. I grew up playing athletics kind of year round, so I had coaches, my entire life, and trainers, and played through college, and I saw what really great coaches looked like. I saw what okay coaches looked like. I saw what really bad coaching looked like. And I've been fortunate in my career that I haven't had a bad boss by any means. I've had some average ones, and then I've had some elite ones. And even of the elite ones, there's still things that you're like, oh, I don't know if I would do it that way, right? And your staff the same way with yours. So Alex talked about, you have your boss as a mentor. I like picking especially when you're starting out a position, somebody who's in the same type of position, who's more experienced as my mentor, just so like I know I'm not asking my boss what to do every 5 seconds. Like I'm asking a peer. A, your peer is going to know more than your boss is going to know about that position. And B, you don't necessarily want your boss fielding 1,000 questions because they have other stuff to go do too. And then finding somebody that's either the next step up or 2 steps up as your unofficial mentor. And so, I talked about Kevin Mahoney at Penn Health is, I shot in the dark, asked him to have drinks at a conference one time, thinking like, there's no way this dude responds to a minion, like there's no chance. And he was nice enough to respond and said, yeah, I'll meet you down there in 20 minutes. And so I stopped eating, drove to where he wanted to go. And I sat there and made sure I was there. I picked his brain and then, thanked him for it. So, there's all sorts of ways to learn from those, but I think mentorship is quite literally the most important aspect of this. And part of that is as you get older and you get to choose where you work. Remember, you don't have to take the first job given to you. And I've turned down positions that were promotions because the culture wasn't the right fit. And it wasn't going to go well with my personality style. And so make sure that as you're selecting the right place. And it won't be perfect, but it needs to fit you and what you're looking for.
Yeah, culture fit is super important. But I also think you all have alluded to this because you're thinking about those mentors. I have found that sometimes they're not even in my organization. They're not at my company. I'm looking for people outside who can give me that objective opinion. They don't need to know how we operate, but they can help me with those people issues, those things that are universal that and have a perspective that someone at the company may have a skewed perspective about, and then it's not giving me the best solutions or ideas of how to move forward. So I really appreciate you all sharing that, and hats off to all of our mentors because they've clearly helped us all grow so much through the years. You know, as we wrap up, I'm watching time. I want to emphasize some crucial takeaways from today's conversation, how important it is to have that intentional support for emerging leaders. Throughout this discussion, I think we've seen some really common foundational leadership habits that are essential, like having a clear direction, that childlike curiosity. I loved that, Jackie. Understanding the data. Derek, I might need your help with that moving forward. And I'll throw in just being able to prioritize and delegate effectively so that you're focused on the strategic pieces of your role. I think it's not just beneficial to focus on those things, but it's essential for our rising stars to understand and develop those skills. You know, for those of you who have joined us today, I think it's a great time to reflect on your organization's approach to nurturing talent. You know, are you actively identifying and investing in your emerging leaders? Are you providing them with the tools, the mentorship, the coaching that they need to thrive? And if these questions are resonating with you, I really encourage you to think deeper about how you can support those rising leaders. Or if you're like, I don't have that support, how can you find it and how can we do that? You know, at Delegate, we're really committed to bridging that gap. We are WBE certified, and so we're constantly looking at women-owned businesses and diverse companies and really anyone who wants to help develop that. Our emerging leaders workshop and coaching offerings are really designed to equip those new leaders with those strategic insights and practical skills. And I loved this discussion because it really just is so important. And Jackie, we may need to do a round 2 of this because there's so many other questions I have that I think we could dive into. But I really invite those of you who participated and joined today to reach out if you have any questions, if you want to explore that work together further. I would love to help you navigate those next steps and connect you with any of our amazing panelists today. As you can see, they all have a wealth of knowledge and insight. There will be an email coming out after today's session with the recording and some other additional information materials that hopefully you'll find helpful. So keep an eye on your inbox. But thank you again, everyone, for being a part of this conversation, for joining us to listen today. Thank you, Jackie and Derek and Alex, especially for your insight and the wisdom you shared. I have 2 pages of notes. So even though I've been studying this, I still learned something new, and I really appreciate all your participation. But please stay in touch, and everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Much.